Stuart Goes to School by Sarah Pennypacker. Today we're going to read pages 17 through 31. Day 2. A brilliant idea woke Stuart up at the crack of dawn. Today I'm going to bring in something so interesting for our big interesting world that all the kids will forget what happened yesterday, he told One Tooth. Stuart crept downstairs. Right away he found a potato that looked just like his first grade piano teacher. He found an enormous hairball that One Tooth had spit up. These were wonderful things, of course, but most kids had seen potatoes and hairballs. To make up for what had happened yesterday, he would need something that they had never seen before. He raced outside and grabbed a shovel. He dug a nice deep round hole. It was an excellent hole, one of his best, but all that was in it was dirt. No gold, no jewels, no mysterious bones, no treasureful stuff at all. Stuart dug another hole. Nothing but dirt. Again, and again, and again, and again. Plenty of holes, plenty of dirt, plenty of nothing to bring in for our big, interesting world. Stuart dropped his shovel. He was getting worried. Great things had been happening to him since he had made his cape. He had grown toast. He had flown. Some animals had come over to play. But lately, not so great things had been happening. Yesterday, his clothes had disappeared. And now this. Maybe his cape wasn't working anymore. Maybe it was turning against him. Stuart, time for breakfast. Aunt Bubble's voice was very small, and Stuart could barely see his own house in the distance. He must have been digging for a long time. He bent down to pick up his shovel. It was stuck. He tugged and pulled it free, but something was caught on the end. It was a hole. A hole had peeled out of the ground and was dangling from his shovel. This had never happened before. But of course, he had never had a cape before. The hole was beautiful and delicate, like a bubble with the top cut off. Carefully, Stuart lifted it from the shovel and blew the dirt off. He folded it up and put it into the pocket of his cape. Inside, Stuart drank 3 tall glasses of orange juice. Digging was thirsty work. "I have a hole in my pocket," he told his family. "A big one?" asked his mother. "Yep," Stuart answered proudly. "Nice and round, too." "Don't put any money in it," warned his father. "I wasn't going to," Stuart said. "I don't have time to sew it up today," said Aunt Bubbles. "I don't want you to sew it up," Stuart explained. He smeared a glop of jam over his toast and shook his head. Grown-ups. All through our big, interesting world, Stuart suffered in silent gloom. One girl took off her shoe and showed where a snake had almost bitten her. A boy with braces showed his collection of things that had gotten stuck in them. These kids probably have hundreds of friends, Stuart thought miserably. If only he had more time, he probably could have found something amazing. By now, all the kids would be crawling all over themselves trying to be his friend. "Hey, Stuart," they'd say, "show us that amazing thing you found again." Stuff like that. Stuart laid his head on his desk to imagine what it would be like. Just then, one of the big kids knocked on the door and handed Mrs. Spindles a note. Mrs. Spindles read the note. She gasped and clutched at her throat. Her eyes grew so large that Stuart wondered if they were going to pop out of her head and go zinging across the classroom. He would really like to see something like that. "Attention, class," Mrs. Spindles cried. "I have an emergency announcement." "Holes," she read. "Hundreds and hundreds of holes. Neighborhoods have been finding them all morning. Detectives and scientists have been called in. Be on the alert today and report anything unusual." Mrs. Spindles dropped the note. "Oh, my dearest blue heavens," she wailed. "Whatever could it be?" "Hailstones, probably," Olivia said. "I'm going to have to wear a lot more barrettes." "Giant earthworms?" Nacho said. "We're going to need some really big robins to eat them." All the kids had lots of ideas for what could have made so many holes. Each idea made Stuart feel worse. Finally, he raised his hand. "Maybe it was a kid," he said in a voice that came out a little squeakier than he wanted. "Maybe a plain old regular kid was just digging around, looking for something." "That is quite impossible, of course," Mrs. Spindles frowned. "Stuart, this is a very serious situation, and it is not the time for jokes." Stuart's head hurt. This was turning into a rotten day. His arms were just about falling off from all the digging. He still hadn't found anything no one had ever seen before. The teacher thought he was making jokes, and then he realized he had an even bigger problem: all that orange juice. He checked the clock. The bell wouldn't ring for hours. He'd never make it. He raised his hand. "I have to use the bathroom." "It's at the end of the hall next to the teacher's room," Mrs. Spindle told him. Stuart wrote the directions down. They sounded simple, but he wasn't fooled. He knew simple things could get tricky fast. "I will not get lost. I will not get lost," he repeated to himself all the way. And he didn't. There at the end of the hall, right next to the teacher's room, was the boys' bathroom. But of course, getting lost was only one of the things that could go wrong. Getting stuck inside was another.